Hi, this is Mr. John Ossick from Malvern Prep in Malvern, Pennsylvania. Today, Kevin Smith, a junior at Malvern Prep, is going to go over the suggested rubric for this year's AP Macro, question number 2, year 2014. Kevin Smith.
So like Mr. Ossick said, we're going to be going over number 2, macro free response questions.
The Federal Reserve can influence the supply of money. A. Assume that the Federal Reserve targets a lower federal funds rate. I. What open market operation can the Federal Reserve use to achieve the lower target?
So in the question, since it says that the Federal Reserve wants to achieve a lower federal funds rate, that means that they're going to go with an expansionary policy to increase the supply of money. They're going to do this by buying bonds. So I would be for AI, the answer is just buy bonds. Part 2 on A, it's going to say, given to your answer of part AI, what will happen to the price of government bonds? So, from economics, we know that with bonds, market for bonds, we know that the price of bonds and the interest rates of bonds have an inverse relationship. So if the price goes up, the interest rates are going to go down. So this is the graph of the bond market. With the Federal Reserve buying more bonds, the demand for bonds is going to increase, therefore driving the price up, as you can see by the graph. Price level is going to increase, and therefore interest rates are going to decrease. That's your answer for part 2.
I do want to ask you a question, Kev. If you go in the money market, could you just throw supply and demand on the money market real quickly?
That's the next question.
That's the next question, but okay, let me ask you this. What would be the reason they would go for an expansionary policy? The economy is what? Probably in recession. Very good.
B. Using a correctly labeled graph in the money market, show the effect of the open market operation from part A1 on the nominal interest rate.
Okay. So if this is the money market, this would be the supply of money. And this would be the initial demand of money. And then with the open market operations of buying bonds, we're going to get a movement along the curve. Can't even read the graph.
And so there's going to be, this is big, show the effect of the open market operation. So when
the Federal Reserve buys bonds, the supply of money is going to increase and shift the curve to the right.
expansionary or contractionary policy is
Expansionary policy.
And the purpose of expansionary policy is to do what? By increasing the money supply, what happens to the nominal interest rates?
Decrease.
Excellent. Put down I for interest rates rather than price. I for nominal interest. Very good. Terrific.
All right, so like Mr. Ossick said, expansionary policy is going to increase the supply of money and decrease the nominal interest rate in the money market.
C. Assume that the Federal Reserve buys government bonds from commercial banks. Based only on this transaction, will the level of required reserves in the commercial banks increase, decrease, or remain the same?
Okay. So, for the Federal Reserve, actual reserves equals the required reserves plus the excess reserves. So we aren't given what the reserve ratio is in this question, but we can assume that with the increase of government spending by plus $100 billion, or assume, like you could give it any value, say it increases by $100 billion. We don't have a value, but we do know that the money supply increases. The reserve ratio itself isn't going to increase, but since the actual reserves have increased, then the level of required reserves is going to increase along with that. And that's what the question's asking. It's asking about the level of required reserves, not the reserve ratio.
So the level in this case, if when the Fed buys the bonds, let's say from Smith Barney or Chase Bank, that person will deposit it in their bank, let's say Citizens Bank or TD Bank. Citizens' actual reserves in the banking system will go up, as you say, by $100. If the required reserve ratio is 10%, then the actual reserves will go up by $10 to cover that deposit. Very good.
D, another monetary policy action involves changing the discount rate. Define the discount rate.
Alright, so this question doesn't really have much to do with the rest of the question, but the discount rate is just the rate of the interest rate from the Fed loaning to directly to banks. That's it. Thank you. I'd like to give thanks to Michael Stangus from the University of Miami. This is his project on the tools of the central bank, Fed policy. Helped us with answering this question.